When Amazon opened a warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama, people were thrilled. Factories were moving out, work was getting harder to find. Minimum wage is not a living wage at $7.25 an hour, but Amazon offers a starting wage of $15 an hour, and that's just for those at the very bottom, with plenty of room to grow and really good health insurance. Jobs were taken quickly and people were happy for the work. More than 5,000 people are employed at that single work site. On day one, every new employee is told they have to download an in-house app that will be used through the workday. When they arrive, people check in on a computer at the door and again when they get to their workstations. The app then tracks them through the day, calculating how much time they're working versus how much time they're off task. Time off task is added up through the day and includes any time they're not actively engaged in the work for which they were hired. Walking from your station to another station is time off task. Going to the bathroom is time off task. Taking a mandatory COVID test is time off task. Periodically, people are suspended or fired for racking up too many of these minutes, but how many minutes is too many is unclear. When workers seek managers to clarify that they were, for instance, pulled for a random security check and those minutes shouldn't be added to their daily time off task, managers aren't available. Often shift workers don't know what managers are on duty or if anyone is physically available. Instead, they turn to the app where they can text a manager or make a case to a bot. Overall, the experience for many of the thousands of workers at the Amazon warehouse in Bessemer is one of anonymity and irrelevance. They feel like faceless cogs or worse. One woman of color likened it to the slavery of her ancestors, where there's an unfeeling and unseen overlord who makes rules without any connection to the human beings being affected. But Amazon pays more than most, so people are reluctant to leave. And there isn't a lot of work locally anyway. So instead, they turned to the retail, wholesale, and department store union for help, thinking if they had a union, maybe they could help them negotiate and address some of the things that made the job really awful. There was campaigning and organizing and eventually a vote. Thousands of workers turned in a ballot, and after what seemed like an excruciating amount of time during which lawyers debated details, the count turned in the favor of Amazon. The union was defeated. Ultimately, people didn't understand how a union could help them. They said they were already paid well, had the kinds of benefits unions usually fight for, didn't mind the app necessarily, and they didn't want to pay $500 a year for something that seemed unclear and maybe unhelpful. This was the most intense labor fight we've had in this nation for some time, and Amazon was a perfect target as the second largest employer in the country. Just so you know, Walmart is the first. Amazon's fear of the union was that workers would make demands that would decrease the company's efficiency, thereby reducing their end product, which is to get anything to anyone in 48 hours or less. It's difficult to empathize with them when we learn that their owner, the richest man in the world, has an app timing 55-year-old women in the bathroom. But we do appreciate when those new socks or a can of tomatoes lands on our doorstep within a day or two of ordering them with a click from our living rooms. The struggle between workers and owners in this country isn't new, and it didn't start in the 1920s. And it didn't start in the 1850s or even in the 1770s. It started in the early 1600s as European people first stepped off their boats and onto this new land, bringing with them their Protestant work ethic and hopes for a new world. It started when indentured servants, most of them children, were brought to Jamestown or carried over on the Mayflower to pay off family debt. It started with enslaved people captured in Africa and forced into a generational system of unpaid labor. The struggle has been part of the American story from the very beginning. Capitalism puts a price on each of us. It reduces us to a number. It tells us we're worth what we can earn. In response, in rebellion, we do everything we can to tell our children and each other that we are loved, that we are worth more than a paycheck, that we are important and we matter in the world, regardless of how much we make or have in the bank. We need to keep speaking those messages because society is designed to tell us something different. I mean, how many of us know someone who makes a lot of money, who believes that they matter more than someone who's poor, right? We see it all the time. We witness choices made to benefit the rich without thought to others because wealth is what we value. So I'm not going to outline those choices, those national priorities, or the way that this has and is really currently playing out. And I'm not doing it because I think we need a more gentle morning. You might have tuned into this sermon thinking that it would be about the labor movement, and I'm going to tell you a secret. I did too. I don't preach on Labor Day. I thought this would be a justice sermon. I'd tell stories about the Triangle factory workers or maybe spend some time on the Poor People's Campaign. But while writing this sermon, I just keep getting pulled in the direction of something more pastoral. I mean, of course, all these things are connected, but these days, as much as we need justice, it seems that we also really need some healing. Well, Derek Chauvin is on trial for the murder of George Floyd. White officer Kim Potter shot and killed Dante Wright, a 20-year-old Black man, after pulling him over for an expired registration. And white officer Eric Stillman killed 13-year-old Adam Toledo, a Latino boy, while the child was trying to comply with the officer's direction. The New York Times tells us that since the trial started, 3 people have been killed every day at the hands of police. None of these are tragic accidents. None of these are anomalies, bad cops doing the wrong thing. Each officer was doing the job for which they were hired and fulfilling the mission of American policing. I've talked about this before, and I'm sure I'm going to talk about it again. And there was another mass shooting, this time at FedEx, where 8 people died. And right before coming on, I heard that there may have been another one last night. So as we carry that grief and the fear and the fury, just think we need to take some deep healing breaths. It can feel like we march and work and sign petitions and join community groups and engage public discourse, trying to bend the arc toward justice, only to find that the union vote didn't pass and that people of color are still being killed in our streets. It can feel deflating, depressing, even hopeless. Spring may have sprung, but this week was cold and damp, much like the American mood. How we spend our time, what we do with ourselves during the day, will often define how we feel about the world. Work matters. finding work for which you are paid a decent wage, work that can afford you some free time and deep relationships, work you find meaningful is life altering. It can be healing for ourselves and for this bruised and fragile nation. How we spend our days, our weeks, as how we engage the deep needs of the world. When we can be of service, it's a gift to us. Over the last week or so, I provided a listening ear to a mother of three for whom the isolation of the pandemic has been maddening. I worked with other New York City ministers on an Earth Day program in direct action. I met with all kinds of professionals regarding the sale and development of our building. I had deep conversations about the state of our congregation's anti-racism work. I met with some folks looking to find ways to create access to fresh food for those who can't afford it. I brainstormed ways parents in our church can get more connected. I worked with new ministers as they find their way into this profession, and I researched labor movements in preparation for what I thought the sermon would be, among other things. It's because I have a job, I have a career, I've even been called to it. I have found where my joy meets the world's need. And not only am I able to be an active part of the work that heals, I'm paid a living wage for it. This isn't true for a lot of people, and it may not be true for you. It wasn't always true for me. I've had jobs I hated, the kind of work that made me dread waking up. Some of them were deadening. I had a job in a basement, had it for 3 months. I would I'd walk into the building normally and go downstairs. Everyone else had regular jobs, but I was in this basement. Walked to my desk and there was a huge pile of papers, huge. And there was a 15-digit numerical code in the corner. And I had to put all these papers into numerical order. I would spend 8 hours a day with each piece of paper, putting this goes before this one, this goes after that one. And if I finished early, I had to sit at that desk and I had to wait for that clock to hit 5, even if there was no work. Didn't matter. I was docked pay if I left. When I finally left and saw the sun for the first time all day, I was exhausted and sad, and I knew the next day would be the same. I'm betting we've all had jobs like that. And you might be in one now, but you may have also found a place where your joy meets the world's need too. And you're feeling maybe sometimes tired and sometimes annoyed, but generally fulfilled. Or maybe you're one of the almost 10 million people in this country who are looking for work but can't find it. I mean, I've also been unemployed. It's an awful feeling, aside from the constant fear about paying bills and rent and the sadness that comes from having all that free time limited by the fact that I had no money. There's also a feeling of not belonging. Right? Society didn't need me. I wasn't contributing. I wasn't required. I was married, but I had no children. I spent my days just wondering what I needed to do to be included in the public conversation, the shared life millions of other people were part of. Part of living well is knowing your life is relevant. We need to know that being alive matters to someone, that we are contributing to a shared social life. Our work might be parenting, or it might be otherwise unpaid, doing charity or justice work, or simply being a good, conscientious, and intentional citizen. Let's remember that money does not actually equal value as much as our capitalistic society tells us it does. We all have value. We are all worthy of love. That's the central message of our faith. You are welcome. You are needed. You are loved. And church shouldn't be the only place you hear it. You should know it's true every day, all the time. Society should reflect that back to you at work, on the street, even when you're being pulled over for an expired registration. I dream of a new world, one that provides what we need without cost. A world where fruit trees are growing on the street so everyone can eat and everyone has somewhere to go in the morning that they find meaningful. And when they get there, they know they're valued and are doing work that matters to someone. No one is expendable. No one is irrelevant. No one should feel anonymous. So after the service, those who are interested are going to go into breakout rooms. I'm going to ask you to try to reflect to each other how much you matter. Please notice the people in the room with you. Ask how they are. Ask who they are. Ask each other if you felt valued this week. Tell each other that you are important, that you are welcome, that your lives are beautiful. It might be the only place some of us will hear that message. And if that's uncomfortable, notice that too. Say that. Recognize that we demonstrate value through money. We're less likely to just tell someone that just being them is what the world needs. Push through the discomfort. Church is designed to be countercultural. That's the point. We're here to provide a living alternative to the life outside of here. I'm going to close actually with the same poem that Brenda has read for us. I learned a long time that poetry is actually better heard twice. And so here we go. The river is famous to the fish. The loud voice is famous to silence, which knew it would inherit the earth before anyone said so. The cat sleeping on the fence is famous to the birds watching him from the birdhouse. The tear is famous briefly to the cheek. The idea you carry close to your bosom is famous to your bosom. The boot is famous to the earth, more famous than the dress shoe, which is famous only to floors. The bent photograph is famous to the one who carries it, and not at all famous to the one who's pictured. I want to be famous to shuffling men who smile while crossing streets. Sticky children in grocery lines, famous as the one who smiled back. I want to be famous the way a pulley is famous, or a buttonhole, not because it did anything spectacular, but because it never forgot what it could do. May we all remember the importance of what we can do.